As an introduction to the first entry in Hayom Yom, the entry of YUD KISLEV, and to explain why YUD KISLEV is such a major holiday, what's the big deal, and to explain why the book of Hayom Yom begins on YUD KISLEV, why that's the first entry on the calendar and not Aleph Tishrei. So the Rebbe prefaces with a very famous and very radical letter of the Rebbe Rashab. And the Friedrich Rebbe actually said about this letter that every single year on YUD KISLEV, he reads it like a Megillah, the same way we read a Megillah on Purim, he reads this letter on YUD KISLEV. And even one year we know that in the middle of the Farbrengen, the Friedrich Rebbe stopped the Farbrengen and he pulled out this letter and he read it for everyone. Additionally, the Rebbe once said about this letter that every single YUD KISLEV, what has to be learned first and foremost is this letter, because this letter helps us appreciate a little bit how crazy of a day YUD KISLEV is, what is so special about it. And how this letter came about is that in 1901, the Rebbe Rashab was not going to be in Lubavitch for YUD KISLEV. He was busy in Moscow. So he wrote this letter to his son, the Friedrich Rebbe, who was in Lubavitch, to share its content with the Chassidim back at home, back in Lubavitch, to explain to them what YUD KISLEV is really all about, why it's such a crazy and powerful day. And of course, the Chassidim had always been celebrating that day for over 100 years since the Alter Rebbe was released from prison on that day. But for the first time, with this letter, Chassidim really understood just how crazy, just how powerful YUD KISLEV is. The following is from a letter of the Rebbe Rashab. And the Rebbe Rashab writes as follows. YUD KISLEV, hachag asher pada v'shalom nafshenu. So he says, this day of YUD KISLEV is a holiday which celebrates the fact that our soul was freed and redeemed in a smooth and peaceful manner. And that expression, Pada v'Shalom, is the central theme of YUD KISLEV, and it describes winning challenges in our life and overcoming obstacles and winning darkness and evil in a smooth, easy, non-combative manner, in a peaceful manner. And why that's the central theme of YUD KISLEV, and why basically all YUD KISLEV Maimarim open with those words, Pada v'Shalom, is because the Alter Rebbe writes in a letter that he was freed from prison. They came to free him while he was in the middle of reading Tehillim, while he was reading that pasuk, Pada v'Shalom nafshe. And he says, on this day YUD KISLEV, Ar v'chayis nafshenu nitan lanu. On this day of YUD KISLEV, the energy of our soul and the light of our soul was given to us, aka Chassidus was given to us. And Chassidus, very interestingly, is referred to as light for our soul, light for our hearts, and energy for our soul. And just those two words, light and energy, why Chassidus is called that. So light, what's interesting about light is such a beautiful thing, but light doesn't introduce anything new to the table. Light doesn't introduce anything new to our lives. Light doesn't introduce anything new to the room. All light does is it illuminates what was always there. It allows you to see and appreciate for the first time what was always right in front of your face. And in the same way, Chassidus is not some new religion. We do the exact same Yiddishkeit. We keep the exact same mitzvahs that all other Jews keep. We study the exact same passages in Torah, but we see it in a whole different light. Chassidus allows you to really see and appreciate what things really mean, to see things to their core, to see the truth behind everything. And Chassidus allows you to really see and appreciate the world for what it is, to see and appreciate Yiddishkeit for what it is, to see and appreciate Torah for what it is. Additionally, we keep the same mitzvahs all other Jews keep. We're doing the exact same motions. But when you live with Chassidus and you learn Chassidus, it infuses everything with chayas, it infuses everything with energy. Everything becomes a lot more alive and on fire and meaningful and powerful. And therefore Judaism and life becomes a lot more energized. And Chassidus, which energizes everything and allows us to see and appreciate everything, was given to us on YUD KISLEV. Hayom hazeh hu Rosh Hashanah l'divrei Elikim Chayim. And he says this day of YUD KISLEV is the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. Just like the physical Rosh Hashanah, just like Aleph Tishrei, the regular Rosh Hashanah, is when physical reality began. It's when the physical world came into existence, and all the energy for all physical reality and all physical existence is infused into the world on Rosh Hashanah. So he says, so too, YUD KISLEV is the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus, that all Chassidus, which has been revealed to the world, and we experience and we live with, came into the world and comes into the world every single YUD KISLEV. It is the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. Asher hanchilanu aviseinu hagdeshim zecher tzadikim hagdeshim levracha l'chayim haba nishmeseim edens chusim yagen aleinu. And he says, it was on YUD KISLEV that our holy fathers, meaning the Chabad Rabbeim, gave to us and bequeathed to us as an inheritance the beautiful gift and the beautiful inheritance of Chassidus. And Chassidus has been bequeathed to every single one of us. It's been given to me, it's been given to you. We just have to claim that inheritance. We have to just tap into that. And what you should realize is the Chassidus, which the Chabad Rebbeim taught us to reveal to the world, the Chabad movement, Chabad Chassidus, is not some new movement and some new philosophy and some new ideology. It is what the Baal Shem Tov intended and meant. Just then everything existed it was the seeds of the movement, and therefore it wasn't so obvious what the Baal Shem Tov wanted or meant with what the things he said and did. And Chabad Chassidus just developed it and revealed what the Baal Shem Tov's Torah was, what the Baal Shem Tov was all about, what the Baal Shem Tov stood for. Now, what's very interesting is that here, the most radical line, he's going to explain the ramifications of this and why it's so radical, but the most radical line in this letter, and the big chiddush of this letter, is that he says, YUD KISLEV is the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. And it's such a radical statement that in the original letter, the Rebbe Rashab actually doesn't write that. The Rebbe Rashab writes, Karaf Adavar Leimer, that it's the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus, which means we can almost certainly say that YUD KISLEV is the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. He kind of suggested almost. That's how radical it is. And just the reason why the Rebbe took that out and here, the way he quotes the letter, he makes it sound like the Rebbe Rashab said, for sure it's the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. YUD KISLEV is for sure the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. So for a few reasons. So first of all, this letter was written in 1901, and originally the Rebbe Rashab wrote, we can almost certainly say that YUD KISLEV is the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. But 2 years later, on YUD KISLEV 1903, the Rebbe Rashab was for bringing, and he says, in the past I said that YUD KISLEV is the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. So clearly he got more comfortable with the statement, and got more behind it, and he took out those words. Additionally, the Frierdiker Rebbe once said that 5 years before 1901, the Rebbe Rashab had once told him in private and personally, he told him that YUD KISLEV is Karav Lihies Rosh Hashanah, which means, again, we can almost certainly say, said the Rebbe Rashab to the Frierdiker Rebbe, that YUD KISLEV is Rosh Hashanah, is Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. And when the Frierdiker Rebbe repeated this, he said that the reason why my father used those words, the reason why my father used that expression that we can almost certainly say, is because it is the style of the Chabad Rebbeim that whenever they're saying a radical chiddush and they're articulating a radical chiddush for the first time, they'll suggest it, and they'll say, perhaps we can say, or maybe we could say. But the Frierdiker Rebbe said, the Chabad Rebbeim don't suggest anything. Anything they say is a certainty, and my father was saying this as a certainty. That's their style, to throw in those words, that maybe we can suggest this. But the Frierdiker Rebbe said, for sure, in my mind, and in reality, it's not a suggestion, it's a crazy fact, that YUD KISLEV is the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus. And now, the Rebbe Rashab is going to explain a little bit what that means and what the ramifications of saying that is. So he says, Zeh Hayom Tchilas Maisecha. This day, the day of YUD KISLEV, is Tchilas Maisecha. It's when everything began. It's when the world truly began. It's when history really began. It's when things really began. Now that expression, Zeh Hayom Tchilas Maisecha, this is the day when everything started, this is the day when everything began, is originally applied to Rosh Hashanah, to Aleph Tishrei. And we say about Aleph Tishrei, Zeh Hayom Tchilas Maisecha, this is when the world began, this is when life began, this is when everything began. And there's a famous question that why in the world do we refer to Aleph Tishrei as Zeh Hayom Tchilas Maisecha? Why do we refer to Aleph Tishrei as when the world began? It's actually not true. Because the world was created, the first day of creation was actually Chaf Ha'el. And Aleph Tishrei is the sixth day of creation, and that's when man was created. And the explanation given is because, of course, technically and physically, the world didn't begin on Aleph Tishrei. Technically and physically, the world began earlier on Chaf Ha'el. But when the world really began was on Aleph Tishrei, because the whole point of everything, the whole purpose of everything, the reason why this whole world is here is to create an environment for man to be able to do what he needs to do. But the whole purpose of creation, the whole purpose of the world is for man to exist and for man to do his unique mission in this world. And everything else you see around you, the planets and our earth and vegetation and animals, all is here to give us the tools and to create the proper environment for man to do what he has to do. And therefore, when life truly began, when the world truly began, when the star of the show came on, was on Aleph Tishrei, was on Rosh Hashanah. And now the Rebbe Rashab says, in a very radical thing, but what is the purpose of man? The purpose is not just to have people walking around and eating and drinking and doing things. The purpose of man, he says, is to study Chassidus and introduce Chassidus and discover Chassidus and reveal Chassidus. And therefore, the real Rosh Hashanah, when life really began, when the world really began, is specifically on YUD KISLEV. So he says, Zeh Hayom Tchilas Maisecha, this day of YUD KISLEV is when the world truly, truly began. And now he explains, Shleimus hakavana hamitis bebrias adam ali aretz. He says the whole purpose of the world is to have a man on this world, for man to do his unique mission. But what is the ultimate purpose of man? What is man's ultimate mission? So he says the ultimate point why we have human beings is lahamshech gili or primius teresenu hakdesha, to discover and find and reveal to themselves and to the world primius hatera, to find and discover and reveal Chassidus. And the reason why we've had thousands and thousands of years of human history, the reason why we had billions of people come through this world, is all to set the stage and put everything in place that eventually the Alter Rebbe on Yitzhak KISLEV should reveal Chassidus and should reveal Chabad Chassidus to the world. Asher nimshach b'yem hazeh b'vchinas hamshacha chlalis al klalos hashana. And he says all the Chassidus that would ever be revealed and ever be studied was all drawn into the world on the original Yud KISLEV, and then on every Yud KISLEV, all Chassidus that year that's going to be discovered and learned and revealed and articulated is put into the world on that Yud KISLEV for the rest of the year. Just like on every Rosh Hashanah we say that all the physical energy which keeps the world physically going this year, that makes everyone be born and die and make money and lose money and health and sickness and just physical reality that it should go on for another year, is all pumped into the world on Rosh Hashanah, and then all that energy just has to play out over the course of a year. And the same way, every Yud KISLEV, that year's dosage of Chassidus, the new way Chassidus is going to be learned and understood and articulated, is all pumped in on Yud KISLEV, and then it just has to be played out over the course of the year. Now, that is a little bit about the day of Yud KISLEV, what is going on, why is such a crazy, powerful, radical day. But what are we meant to do? What is our avodah? So now he says, V'aleinu, and on our part, what we're meant to do on this crazy day, what our avodah is, L'ha'ar levavenu b'yem hazeh b'vchinas chefetz v'ratzim primi v'atzmi b'amitas nekudas levavenu. So instead of just sitting back and being cold and jaded and uninvolved, we have to try to tap into this reality. We have to try to get a little excited. And he says, L'ha'ar levavenu, we have to try to move ourselves and stir our hearts, that we should be eager and truly want in a deep way from the depth of our hearts, that we should truly be eager and want in a very deep way from the depth of our hearts, that Chassidus should touch us, that our souls and our hearts should be filled with and illuminated by and set on fire by the Teres Chassidus, that we should be excited by Chassidus. So we have to try to tap into this. We have to try to be open and receptive to living with and experiencing Chassidus. And now in the next paragraph, he continues a little bit about what our avodah is in Yud KISLEV, and he draws a little bit more parallels between Yud KISLEV, the Rosh Hashanah of Chassidus, and Aleph Tishrei, the regular Rosh Hashanah, the standard Rosh Hashanah. And basically, just outside briefly, what he's going to say is that on Rosh Hashanah we have an interesting expression. We say that on Rosh Hashanah the avodah is Mima Makim Karisicha Hashem, which means we turn to Hashem, we call to Hashem from the depth of our hearts, from the depths of our being. And basically, Rosh Hashanah is about trying to tap into the essence of our soul, to the Etzem and Neshama, to the Pintel Yid, to the core of our being, to the child within us. And it says that the way you approach Hashem is the way He'll respond to you. The same way, that same dynamic exists between two human beings. If you approach someone else in a very standoffish, cold, superficial way, so the automatic response is that they'll be a little bit more cold and superficial and standoffish with you. If you give someone a handshake, they'll extend the hand back to you. And basically, people will mirror however you approach them, however you reach out to them. And it says if you approach Judaism and you approach Hashem in a very superficial way, so the way Hashem will reveal Himself to you or make Himself felt in your life, and the way Yiddishkeit will feel in your life will be very cold and superficial. As opposed to if you really come with your all, if you approach Hashem and approach Yiddishkeit with your full neshama, with the core of your being, with your etzem your neshama, so then you're able to experience Yiddishkeit in the deepest way. You're able to connect with Hashem in the deepest way. And basically, what the Rebbe Rashab writes is that the job of Yud KISLEV, what we're trying to do on Yud KISLEV, the avodah of Yud KISLEV, is to approach Yiddishkeit and to approach Hashem with the depth of our neshama, with the depths of our soul, and that in turn makes Hashem respond to us and reveal Himself to us in the deepest way possible. And the way Hashem touches us and communicates with us is through the Torah mitzvahs. And if we truly, truly want to connect with Hashem in the deepest way, if we truly want to be open and receptive to Chassidus, then Hashem responds by introducing to the world and introducing to us and allowing us to tap into the Torah of Chassidus and to be able to practice Judaism in a way which is infused with Chassidus. So let's just read the words. So he says, Mimamakim Kresicha Hashem. On this day of Yud KISLEV, we approach Hashem and call to Hashem from the depth of our being, from the depth of our heart. Lahamshich bechinas emek upnimias teres Hashem u'mitzvahs Hashem bechinas pnimias v'atmas arin seif. And when we approach Hashem with the depth of our being, with the core of our neshama, that in turn elicits a response from Hashem's ultimate depth, from Hashem's Atzmos, from Hashem's Pnimius Atzmos. And what emerges is, what comes out of there, how Hashem touches us and interacts with us, is through Torah mitzvahs. And Hashem reveals to us and allows us to experience the real deepest form of Torah and the deepest form of mitzvahs, the deepest form of Yiddishkeit. Sheyar b'pnimius nafshenu. And when you're practicing Yiddishkeit in this ultimate powerful way, when you're experiencing and learning and living with the deepest parts of Torah, which translates in you experiencing mitzvahs in the deepest way, you're living with the deepest form of mitzvahs, or you're experiencing mitzvahs in the deepest way, so that touches you to the core of your neshama, to the core of your soul. In other words, when you're learning Torah very superficially, and thereby all the actions you're doing are very superficial, that won't touch you to the core of your being, it will touch you very superficially. And the Yiddishkeit will touch you very superficially and change you very superficially. But as opposed to when you learn Chassidus and therefore experience mitzvah to their depth, it touches you to your depth. Asher kol atzmeisenu, that your entire being to your core, right, to learn kol mitzvahsenu, ha'etzem ispashus, every aspect of your being, internally, externally, in and out, will all be transformed by the Yiddishkeit you do, will all be transformed by the Torah you do, that the Torah and Yiddishkeit you do will affect you in and out. Your whole being will be moved by it and changed by it. And therefore your entire being will be directed to Hashem, purely to Hashem, without any ulterior motives, without any bad motives or selfish motives. Legarish mitanu kol mida ra megunam amidas hativius. And therefore any evil or vile trait or character trait or motive won't be able to thrive anymore and will be thrown out. As opposed to if you keep Yiddishkeit very superficially and you just go through the motions, so while your body is doing good things and your body's not doing bad things, internally on the emotional and mental level, on the motive level, you could have all kinds of weird motives and bad motives and selfish motives. As opposed to when the Torah truly takes you and the mitzvahs truly take you, it totally takes your being and all evil is expelled from you. And therefore, there's no evil motives within you. Kiyam kol asiyasenu v'inyanenu, and therefore everything you do is driven by pure motives. Hein ba'avoda, hainu tefillah v'Torah, whether you're doing Yiddishkeit, when you're learning or studying Torah, or keeping mitzvahs, or davening, v'hein b'nyani elam hamachachim kimagaf, or even when you're just going through day-to-day life, you're doing things that a person needs to do, a healthy person, you're sleeping, you're eating, you're using the bathroom, etc., etc. So he says, "Yihiu bechavana amitus l'shem shemayim asher chafetz Hashem chulu." So it's all driven by a pure and true motive, which is because Hashem wants this, and you want Hashem, you want to connect with Hashem through these things. And there's no, again, bad motive or selfish motive, because your whole being is, your neshama is taken over your whole being. Your whole being's on fire and connected to Hashem. Hashem yisbarach avarachamim. Now he says, though, says the Rebbe Rashab, that concludes the Rebbe Rashab, that this is what we're meant to be working on. This is the avodah of the day. The thing is, though, it's very hard in life to succeed, and ultimately to succeed in life, we need a lot of siyata d'shmaya. We can't do anything on our own. We always need Hashem's help and Hashem's guidance and Hashem's blessing. Therefore, he says, Hashem yisbarach avarachamim yirachem aleinu, our merciful Father Hashem should take pity on us and have mercy on us and help us. And he should place us and direct us and put us on the true path and on the right path and help us be the best people we can be. And then he concludes, and that will allow us to live with and tap into the pasuk at Tehillim, which says, Yasher yechsef v'neme, which means a yasher, a straight man, a good man, a tzaddik, yechsef v'neme, will be able to see Hashem's face, will be able to experience Hashem's face, which means, just like when you see someone's face, they're in your face, you're very aware of their presence. So Yechsef v'neme is a way of living where Hashem, you see Hashem's face constantly, you're very aware of Hashem's presence in everything you do and everything you say, and you're constantly aware of Hashem's presence and are living with Hashem's energy. And that is the letter of the Rebbe Rashab. And right after YUD KISLEV 1901, which was a Shabbos, the Chassidim sent this letter all over to all Chabad communities to explain to them what YUD KISLEV is, how amazing it is. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says that he received 23 letters from different cities and communities describing the very interesting reactions that different communities had, because this letter really caused a great stir in the Chabad world and in the Hasidic world. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says there's 4 letters which have to be shared because they're very interesting. So reaction number 1 the Frierdiker Rebbe shared is that in the city of Brisk, so when the Hasidim got this letter, they decided that although they had celebrated YUD KISLEV, they had totally not celebrated it appropriately. They had not really understood just how crazy the day was. And therefore they decided they needed a YUD KISLEV 2.0. They were going again. And coming up was Purim Katan, and therefore they decided that on Purim Katan they're going to go all out and make a crazy celebration, and they're going to properly celebrate YUD KISLEV. And when the great Goyen, the Brisker Rav, Reb Chaim Brisk, who lived in Brisk, so when he heard about this and he read the letter, so he was personally actually very close to the Rebbe Rashab. And when he heard the Chassidim's plans, he said, no, ein ma'arvin simcha v'simcha, which means we're not allowed to lump together two celebrations. Every celebration has to get the attention it deserves. Each one has to be celebrated separately. Therefore, he says, don't lump it together with Purim Katan. It has to be celebrated a day on its own, especially the way the Rebbe Rashab talks about it, what a crazy day it is. That was reaction number one. Reaction number two is that in the city of Kremenchuk, so when the Hasidim got this letter, they decided to make a 3-day festival that should go Yud Zayin, Yud Ches, Tes Zayin, Yud Zayin, Yud Ches Shvat. And actually, Yud Zayin Shvat was Shabbos Shira, so it was very appropriate. And it was 3 days straight, Tes Zayin, Yud Zayin, Yud Ches Shvat, of celebration and for bringing and dancing. And it says that in the city of Kremenchuk, there was actually a lot of Peilisher Chassidim. There was a lot of Chagas Chassidim. And they joined in the festivities and in the celebrations, and all their Yidden and all their Rabbanim came to celebrate it well. And one of the Peilisher Rabbanim there, so in the midst of the celebrations, he said, Baruch Hashem, Chabad left, which means, thank God, Baruch Hashem, Chabad's alive, Chabad's on fire. He says, Hashem should bless us that Chagas so uplevin, which means Chagas, Peilisher Chassidim should also come to life. Hashem should bless us that we should be as alive and as on fire. That was reaction number two. Reaction number three is that in the city of Vilna, so when the Hasidim got this letter, they decided right there and then that day they're going to make a huge celebration. And one of the Rabbanim in the town, who was a non-Chassid, he was a Mastagir, and he was a little bit cynical of Chabad, a little bit cynical of Hasidim, and a little bit cynical of Chassidus. So when he heard about this and he saw the letter, so he went to the great Goyen, Reb Chaim Eiser, and he repeated the letter to Reb Chaim Eiser, and then he sneered and he said, in the Gemara and the Talmud it says that there are 4 Rosh Hashanahs every single year. But apparently by the Chassidim there's 5 Rosh Hashanahs. That's what he said, with like a sneer. And Reb Chaim Eiser sighed, and he said, "By Zeh kumtzu und bei uns wird weniger," which means by Chabad, by the Chassidim, Judaism is becoming more alive, more on fire. It's getting stronger and stronger, and by us, it's getting, as time goes on, it's getting weaker and weaker. Things are slowly starting to be stripped away. And then the fourth reaction was in the city of Petersburg, and there was a chassid by the name of Ben Sien who used to go there for business all the time, and he went there once with this letter. And he was staying by a secular relative of his by the name of Yaakov, and Yaakov had grown up Chabad, but he had dropped everything, and for 19 years already, he had dropped everything, and he didn't keep kosher, he didn't keep Shabbos, he didn't keep anything. And Ben Sien was staying with him, and he showed him the letter. And when Yaakov read the letter, he was very moved and inspired, and he said that he wants to host a celebration, he wants to host a farbrengen in his house, and that since the house isn't kosher, somebody else should prepare the food and bring their kelim. And he hosted this major party and major celebration and farbrengen in his house. And at the farbrengen, he was very inspired. He said from now on, he's machlet that his house is going to be a kosher house. He's going to keep Shabbos and keep kosher. And right there and then, he smashed all his treifa, all his non-kosher kelim. And those are the 4 reactions that the Frierdiker Rebbe shared.